and innovations that have defined the odds. I'm suggesting that we need to be more selective about our innovation. I'm suggesting that we need to treat innovation as a complement and not a substitute to the established core. I'm suggesting that we need a new mantra in this industry of grow the core and add some more, because core is king. Now, if I'm suggesting that core should be a more significant focus than innovation, you're probably thinking, wow, that's ironic coming from a marketer who spent her entire career launching over 100 innovations, and I get it. But it's my passion, it's the research, and it's my perspective that has actually led me to where we are today with this conclusion. So today, I'm going to tell you that innovation fails. I'm going to examine the facts and the why and the data and assign responsibility to that. I'm also then going to suggest that if you're not growing the core in this current environment and the future environment, you're going to get left behind. I'm then also going to tell you that core is king, but working on the core is not standing still. Evolving that core is equally as important. And finally, if you've grown the core and you have permission to add some more, I'm going to tell you how you can do it. But I'm going to say selective innovation is key. And we're going to have a discussion around how, as an industry, we can collaborate to make that happen. Now, before I move on, the FMCG industry, in regards to when I was looking at this and researching it, is absolutely peppered with hundreds of different definitions of what is and what is not innovation. So I'm going to break it down for you. Now, this is the innovation pyramid, and the definitions I'm going to give you today are as per Innovators Playbook, which I quoted quite frequently in my essay. So let's break it down. If I'm talking about core or core innovation, this is really around optimizing existing products. And working on your core is incredibly important because your core is 80% of your revenue, your high volume SKUs, and often the SKUs with the lowest substitutability. And it's important too because working on that core also defines your brand promise. More on that later. Now, next is adjacencies. And adjacencies are an extension of the core. And this is expanding into new company businesses. An example of this might be a limited edition, a line extension, a collaboration, or perhaps the added benefits into your product. And next, at the top is disruptive. Whilst this might be the most exciting innovation to work on, it actually has the highest percentage rate of failure. And disruptive innovations are breakthrough innovations that don't yet exist, so pure white space. An example within our environment might be Up and Go from Sanitarium. Now, it doesn't stop there. Because when I'm talking innovation today, I'm actually referring to mostly disruptive innovations, but depending on how this product shows up on shelf, it can be an adjacency. Similarly, when I say new product developments, mostly I'm talking around core optimizations and developments done on your core. However, some of those, depending on the definition, also sit into adjacencies. So there is quite an overlap in this industry. And finally, just to keep the playing field level, when I refer to the data and the case studies in this, I am talking around packaged goods in the grocery setting from an FMCG perspective. Okay, now we've got that out of the way. Let's talk about our first pillar. And that I mentioned in the introduction that innovation has a high percentage rate of failure. But how high? 95% of FMCG innovations fail before year one. And if you do manage to crack a winning idea, only 40% of those will survive into year two. Furthermore, in FMCG, less than 5% of total profits are derived from innovation. And if you do launch an innovation, 1 in 4 actually shrinks brand sales. And the real kicker, innovation does not change its sales rank by more than 20% between weeks 8 and weeks 52. So that innovation is going to prove itself or not very quickly. And the real kicker, the cost to launch one innovation is anywhere between $10,000 and $10 million. Now that's the cost of entry. Now suppose you're probably thinking, oh wow, that's a lot. How do we get here? Who's to blame? Who's accountable? Can I point some fingers? And actually, the reality is we are all accountable. And that's a collective we, because the consumer, the retailer, and manufacturers are actually responsible. Let me show you. The first of which is businesses' motivations to innovate are actually not consumer-centric. I'm going to flip this. If we do have successful innovations, they actually are most adaptable and adoptive when they solve a consumer problem. However, in a recent study commissioned by NTT on 1,000 growth engine companies, FMCG included, the question was asked, what's your catalyst for innovation? And businesses said, business growth, process efficiency, profitability. None of them are solving unmet needs for consumers. And because of this often results in innovation being launched by manufacturers and it being what they can make and not solving problems for consumers based on their needs or their wants. Which leads me to my next point. There's a say-do gap. Consumers, they're part of the problem too. Why? Well, actually, interestingly, in FMCG, 80% of concept tests actually pass. I feel like that's a great number. However, when they go on shelf, only 40% of those innovations actually adhere to the promise on those concepts. So this means somewhere along the way, the 4 Ps have been eroded, and that product that turns up on shelf is vastly different for consumers versus what was tested. And finally, the range reviews. There is increasing pressure on suppliers to arrive at range reviews with multiple innovations, innovate or get left behind. And because of this actually results in conflicting KPIs. Well, the supplier, they want that innovation to be ranked. They think there's going to be that incremental growth that's going to come from that. And the retailer, well, they've got to manage the added pressures as well of total shelf space, pick slots, DCs, margin, all of those things. And actually, all of that comes to a head. And what often happens is the core is deleted in replace for unproven innovation. This causes a vicious spiral. The core is deleted, the innovation launches, it fails, and then the brand declines. So, I mentioned in the beginning, however, is that actually focusing on the core and it is increasingly important in the current and the future environment. So let's move on to pillar 2. Why? Why is this so important? Why should we be focusing on the core? Well, there's many reasons. The first of which is that consumer sentiment is low and the consumer is squeezed. We all know this. We've seen and heard through the election, the cost of living crisis is absolutely right. But interestingly, branded products are actually crucial in these uncertain times. Consumers are telling us 65% of them are actually choosing brands that they trust and have high quality in these uncertain times. The second point, retailers are optimizing their range. We've seen this again coming out in the media, and lots of retailers are following suit. With this, though, really begs the question, have you earned your space on shelf? Because if you haven't, and that core is not thriving, it's going to be pretty obvious very soon. Private labels are also experiencing rapid growth. Another statistic that we've seen explode in the last couple of weeks and months since I've written this essay. And this really begs the question, is your core working hard to be relevant? And this is important because in this day and age, over 50% of consumers are buying more private label than ever. So you need to be protecting your core against your threat of private label. And finally, I don't want to harp on this too much. We all know what's happening out there. There is massive global uncertainty. Tariffs are on, tariffs are off, tariffs are on, tariffs are off. Like, we don't know what we're going to wake up to anymore. And with that, coupled with the fact that there is increased supply chain complexities and uncertainty, plus the pressure of sustainability, your question is your core ready to serve in this turbulent time? So all of this together shows that the future of FMCG is a core-focused industry. So I guess what you're thinking, what does this mean for innovation? What does this mean for the core? And how do we find a sweet spot? Well, let's ask Steve Jobs, who is undoubtedly one of the most famous and successful innovators of our time. And Steve Jobs says, innovation is not about saying yes to everything. It's about saying no to all but the most crucial features. In FMCG in Australia, we launch anywhere between 2,000 and 5,000 innovations every year. And with that high percentage of failure rate, it sounds like we're saying yes to an awful lot. So what happens when we take a step back and we actually say no to all but the most crucial features? Well, you get the core, which leads me to my third pillar of core is king. So why is the core so important? Well, actually, 80%. 80% of growth from FMCG comes from the established core. Not from innovation, not from adjacencies, not from disruptions, but from the core. And in case you need further convincing, the core has 4 times higher uplift on promotion than innovation. The core has 2 to 3 times higher repeat rates than innovation, and the core has 2 times higher profits than innovation. And the study that quoted these statistics also said, it's improbable that your brand will grow if you do not have a flourishing core. So my question is, are you focused on the 80%? And the stakes are high. When innovation fails, we seem to go back to the drawing board. But if your core is failing, you're having conversations about headcount. Now, the core is not only the growth driver for FMCG, it also defines your brand promise. What is your brand promise? Well, it's also your ticket to evolve. It's your ticket to evolution. It's your ticket to being relevant with consumers. I'm going to show you. What is a brand promise? So a brand promise is what the market does not provide, what people need, what you deliver, finds that sweet spot in the middle. It's your accountability to consumers. It's why they buy you over someone else, and it's how you show up across every single touch point. Why is this important? Well, in this day and age, based on all of the challenges that I've described, 75% of consumers are more likely to buy a brand that aligns with their personal values and beliefs. But it also, as I mentioned, is that ticket to evolution. Working on the core is not standing still. Yes, it might be perceived as far less exciting in the industry than the prospect of incremental and exciting innovation. However, it is crucially important. And I'm going to give you an example. So if we take a step back out of FMCG for a minute, I'm going to show you how you can evolve your core without the need for innovation. Let's look at McDonald's. McDonald's, their brand promise is making delicious, feel-good moments easy for everyone. Bit wordy if you ask me, but get the idea. And if I were to say, McDonald's, what's your core? You're probably thinking burger and chips. Now, I'm going to take one of those, a Big Mac, and show you how you can evolve based on your brand promise. Big Mac. Big Macs are delicious, relevant in their brand promise. McDonald's is not standing still. They're constantly evolving that Big Mac. The latest news, they're in search for making their best burgers ever, which actually means more mayonnaise on their buns and fluffier buns. A sentence I never thought I'd be saying live on stage. Feel-good moments. The next one, also part of their brand promise. So a great example of this is collaboration and partnerships, where McDonald's actually partnered with the Sydney Swans. And every time that the Sydney Swans won a game, consumers were able to get a free Big Mac. Not only is that great from a brand building perspective, but it also encourages trial, which is incredibly important for your brand. And finally, easy. And this is the other thing. Evolving your brand promise and working on your core is also a way to solve the problems for consumers and being constantly relevant. So consumers hate waiting in line. They absolutely hate it. So through the loyalty app, McDonald's actually allowed consumers to buy Big Macs for a discounted price. They got loyalty offers and rewards. Here, you can download the Macca's app and you're able to receive a Big Mac for $1. And that's the key. You can see through all these things, delicious, feel-good moments and easy, they have actually evolved on their brand promise. And all of these deliver incremental uplifts and revenue without the need for disruptive or adjacent innovation. But it doesn't end there. There are many other ways that you can grow your core. I'm going to show you. Renovate relevance. Are you up to date with the latest trends with consumers? And are you evolving to make sure that happens? Ferrero is a great example of this through public sustainability commitments, where they are able to update and continue to reiterate their packaging, making it relevant for consumers. Mental availability. Are you in the hearts and minds of consumers? And are you across the vast networks now on where consumers are consuming their media? Sunrise does an excellent job of this, where they are constantly building that brand. And the real kicker, they're not waiting for innovation to turn on media dollars. Physical availability. Mars Wrigley does an amazing job of this. Are you easy to shop, easy to buy? And Mars Wrigley does this through showing up in convenience, omni-channel, alt channels, vending machines, retail, absolutely everywhere. And growing your total distribution points can easily increase your revenue. Are you distinctive? Are you clear in the way you show up? Is your brand promise shining through across multiple touch points? Do consumers know it's iconically you and not someone else that they're picking up, particularly not private label? Coke does an amazing job of this, through that red that shines through in absolutely all touch points, plus the cans, that come through a lot of their touch points. So if you have a brand with a strong brand promise that is evolved, if you have a flourishing core, and if, and only if, you can answer yes to these few things, congratulations, you've earned the right to innovate. And because of that, your innovation is 2.5 times more likely to succeed. And don't you want that? Given the time, the money, the investment, the resource, don't you want that innovation to succeed? Absolutely. Retailers want growth. Suppliers want growth. It's a win-win for all. Now, this leads me to my next pillar. If you have grown your core and you have permission to add some more, selective innovation is key. Adjacencies are a great way to do this, and this is an expansion of your core, hence why growing your core is so important. And the most successful innovations are the ones that have grown the core and now successfully add some more via adjacencies. If you do this well, you are actually you are going to grow 20% faster than your peer set. So when it's done right, you can have success. I'm going to give you an example on how you can do that. Vegan Magnums. Why was this product such a success? Well, it was launched in 2019. I'm going to tell you why. The first of which is it had a flourishing core. This innovation was used for the right reasons. It wasn't to solve a business gap. This brand had great momentum at the time. The next, it was actually an expansion of the core and the brand promise. It was distinctively Magnum in how it showed up, and it delivered on the brand promise of pleasure you can't measure, actively put into the market in a way that makes sense to the brand and consumers. Thirdly, it really solved an unmet consumer need, and that made it more adoptable. At the time, consumers were searching and asking for delicious, dairy-free options, but they didn't want to compromise on taste. Enter Magnum Vegan. And finally, most importantly, this was supported through the line. But it wasn't just supported in year one. It had a year 1, a year 2, and a year 3 support plan. This wasn't a launch and leave. It was a launch and love. And because of this, 6 years later, this product is still in market. Now, if we're going to grow the core and add some more, it's obviously a change that is needed in regards to a shift in culture to make this happen. I'm going to give you some examples of what we can do. The first is which is I truly believe we need to embed a core-first culture into our industry. Now, I'm suggesting that we actually start with the core first in range reviews. Let's flip the conversation. Instead of asking each other, what innovation have you got, how quickly can I have it? Let's actually take a step back and go, what are you doing to drive your core, and have you earned the right to innovate? Then, let's reward core growth. Let's stop high-fiving each other over potentially failed innovation and actually go, let's embed core growth into our KPIs and into our joint business plans. Second point, though, is we need to fail faster. And innovation in some capacity is here to stay, and that's okay. When it's selective and done well, it plays a role. However, we've got to fail a bit before we get to the ones that succeed. And with that, I'm suggesting that actually, we look at shorter range reviews. Maybe it's an innovation implementation review. I told you at the beginning that in FMCG, innovation does not change its sales rate from week 8 to week 52. So why are range reviews so long? Some are 6 and some are 12. Surely that space on shelf can be better served by other products. Minimal viable products. So let's work together to create MVPs. What is it? Minimal viable products is essentially a prototype of your SKU before it's ready for mass launch. Too often in this industry do we do a big ta-da and we launch a brand, but actually we need to test it even further. This is an example of PepsiCo, a PepsiCo sub-brand of Driftwell, where they actually partnered with Amazon and launched in a prototype to consumers where it was not quite ready for mass launch, but good enough to get some consumer feedback. And with that, they partnered with Amazon and they did an e-com launch. And from that, they gained amazing feedback from their consumers. They then iterated and they were able to launch with success. Coles and Woolworths have some of the biggest e-com platforms in Australia at the moment. Can we create an incubation hub so that we can test better and turn those fails into scales? And finally, I truly believe we need to do a better job of co-creating innovation. Too often do suppliers arrive at range reviews with the big reveal over the innovation that they are expecting to range. And often that product is already on a boat. Let's make sure that we're having more robust discussions. Let's make sure we can avoid waste and write-off from this as well. At the end of the day, there's certainly wins in that. And let's make sure that we're actually asking each other what innovation we bring, and is that going to support the needs that I need within my category and my retail environment. So, wow, we've been on a journey. We've covered a lot of ground. The question for this essay topic was innovation, MPD, and the cost of entry. And I've shown you that cost is high. The high percentage rate of innovation that fails. The high amount of SKUs that we launch every year. And the high cost to make that happen. But that cost is not only the cost of entry, that's the cost of failure. So let's work together to change the statistics. Let's work together to create an environment so that cause can grow and innovation can thrive. Let's work together to stop treating innovation as the silver bullet for growth and really see it as a complement and not a substitute to the established core. Let's all grow the core and add some more, because core is here.
Helen, congratulations, and thanks for the presentation. We'll now go to questions on paper, and I've got the first one. So let me just start by giving you two figures. The first is that registration of patents around the world since COVID is down at